I hope we're doing good today. You will need your document that we started yesterday. So if you do not have that open, go ahead and open it. Our bell work is ready for us in our pair deck. So we need to head on over there. If you didn't sign in, I'm putting the link in the chat so you can just click it and go. And I will give you a few moments to answer your question and open your document so that we are ready to go. We will get started around 1:30, so it gives you about 3 minutes. All right, so our question is, what is the difference between biotic and abiotic factors? That is our question that we should be answering. All righty, we have about 1 minute left. If you've answered your question, please make sure that you have this document pulled up. This is what we're going to use to take our notes on today. As we started yesterday, we are going to do the bottom half today. So make sure you have it pulled up and you are ready to go. Alrighty. So in our chat, I see our question today deals with kind of what we were talking about yesterday. Just as a refresher, because we will be expanding on that today. What is the difference between biotic and abiotic factors? So I'm seeing biotic are living things and abiotic are non-living things. Okay. Um, a few people have even gone down a little bit more and told us that our um, a few people have gone a little bit more in depth and told us that we are looking for biotics are like trees and animals and plants versus abiotic are things like wind and rain and rocks and mountains, which is very, very true. Good job, guys. So today we are going to be looking at our levels of organization within our ecosystems, and we are going to talk about kind of how some of these organisms actually live and things that they do within their environment. So our to start off, we're going to introduced that our ecosystems are broken into four major categories. We have organisms, we have populations, communities, and ecosystems. And we talked yesterday during our intro day about what kind of goes into ecosystems, as well as giving that a true definition. Um, Ecology is the study of relationships and organisms to each other and their physical environment. We know that, you know how I like word breakdown. So, eco is always going to deal with anything that deals with the environment. So, if anybody's talking about eco friendly chemicals or eco friendly plastic, they're talking about things that are good for the environment. We know that ology always means the study of, so ecology is the study of our physical environment. So, to start us off, we're going to get started with organisms. Organisms have all of the characteristics of life, meaning that they are made of cells. That also means that they do have a lifespan. Some organisms are born, some of them are hatched, some of them just grow, if we're talking about plants. But they do have a specific lifespan. So, they do. Have those characteristics within them. Next, we have our population. And with populations, these are groups of interacting and interbreeding organisms. They do have to be in the same species to be considered a population. So, what that means, if we are talking about animals and how animals further their breeds or their lines. If you have dogs, you can have dogs that breed amongst each other. So you can have, I used to have a pit bull, y'all know that. You can have a pit bull and say a boxer, and they mate, and you have a pit bull boxer mix. But if you have, say, you can't have a cat dog. Like, I know there's a cartoon out before that was a cat dog. That is not possible because you cannot mate animals that are not in different species, that are in different species. Chromosome numbers don't line up, and it's just impossible to do. So there is no cat dog that will ever occur naturally in nature. Now, if somebody did a weird lab experiment and figured out a way that they can make it happen, that's different. But in nature, you do not have animals that are not in the same species that have the ability to breed. There is a wolf and a dog. Yes, wolves and dogs are very closely related. Domestic dogs are actually descendants of wolves. Domesticated dogs are. So they could have the possibility to do it, but they don't usually do that in the wild, but it's not like a cat and a dog that are completely different species of animals. All right, so next we have communities, and within communities, this is a group of interacting populations. So if we're talking about, say, the rainforest, and the rainforest has a lot of different birds and frogs and snakes and we'll go with monkeys that are all living kind of in the same area. Well, the community would be all of these different types of animals living together, interacting. Some of them get eaten, some of them don't. Some of them have special relationships with other animals and they help each other out. Some of them, not so much. They do more harm than they do helping them. But those would be considered animals that are in a community. They're not necessarily the same species, but they do interact and live within the same areas. And then that kind of takes us to with our communities, they do not include our abiotic factors. They are just the living things that are within that area or that one particular place. Food could definitely go into this too. So when you're talking about food chains, so you may have specific plants that only grow in one particular community. You might have certain types of grass that certain animals eat that only grow in that certain place. So all that goes in there. That does not include any of the abiotic factors. So we're not talking about weather. We're not talking about clouds. We're not talking about rain. Any of those factors that go into that. Those are not part of communities. All right. Lastly, we have our ecosystem. This does include the abiotic factors. So the amount of rain that actually falls in an area can definitely definitely have an impact on that. If you're talking about a desert versus a rainforest, the rain that comes in those areas definitely makes an impact on the ecosystem itself. We're talking about clouds, you could talk about mountain ranges, because it definitely changes the terrain in the area of that ecosystem. So it's dealing with the community, which are the living things that are in the area, as well as the abiotic or non-living factors that are in that particular environment. Does anybody have questions about any of that? If you do, please put them in the chat, or you can raise your hand and I can unmute you so you can share your questions or viewpoints. All right, I'm not seeing any hands or questions, so we're going to move on. All right, so when it comes to the way things are on our particular planet, we have something that is called the biosphere. And we know that bio means life. Sphere is usually a 3D circle. And we know that when it talks about the Earth, it might just be talking about a particular piece that deals with the Earth, maybe not just the circle itself. But the biosphere is going to be the thin layer that supports all of the life that is on our planet. It's kind of like the skin of an apple. If we were to compare the size, our biosphere would be about the thickness of the skin and would kind of serve some of the similar purposes. So you could have our biosphere be like the protective layer. So if you've ever maybe cut an apple and left the apple there, you notice like over time, if you don't eat it and you just leave it there, it begins to turn brown because it has been exposed to the elements. Is a very specific reason why that happens, but we'll talk about that when we get to chemistry. Spoiler alert. But it does protect the apple from other elements. Our biosphere does the same thing for us. It helps us keep the things that we need to survive, as well as offer a layer of protection from things that may possibly harm us from space and from other places like radiation and some other stuff that goes on. All right, so just to recap, we have our smallest piece of our ecosystem, or the very basic part of ecology, is going to be the organism. We then have populations, which is a collection of the same organism. And then we have communities, which are multiple populations working together in the same area, does not include the abiotic factors. And then you have your ecosystem that does include the community as well as abiotic factors that are in the area. All right, so we are going to watch a video, and this video is going to explain to us the difference between habitats and niches. They are a little different, and this is the second part of what we need to discuss today. So as you're watching it, that is what you are looking for. If you find it in the video before the video is over, you can go ahead and type it in our Paired Up box, and I will get your response. Whoop.
Welcome to Moo Moo Math and Science. In this video, I'd like to talk about the ecological habitat and niche. A habitat is an area where an organism lives. The habitat might be a single tree or a much larger area. For example, the pistol shrimp spends most of its life in a small burrow that it hangs out with its friend the goby fish. On the other hand, a hawk will have a much larger habitat because it can adapt to just about anywhere in its surrounding area. Within the habitat, organisms fulfill their own niche. You can think of a niche like an organism's job or role. Take a restaurant. Within the restaurant, you have someone who's collecting the money, cooking, and someone cleaning up. Each of them have their own niche. For example, take this pond. Within this pond, you may have ducks diving down feeding on plants, ovocets wading out feeding on crustaceans and insects, and plovers on land looking for its own type of insects. Within the niche, you have generalists. For example, these are organisms that can live on a variety of different types of foods. For example, a mouse or a raccoon. And then you have specialists. that live on a very narrow range of foods. For example, the panda bear live almost exclusively on bamboo. Both of these are important, the habitat and the niche, for organisms to survive and for an ecosystem to be healthy and happy. Thanks for watching, and Moo Moo Math uploads a new math and science.
Get ready.
All right, so go ahead and type your answer in our Pear Deck box. What is the difference between a habitat and a niche? A habitat and a niche. What is the difference? What is our difference? So I see quite a few people that have not started typing. Eric, Peyton, Montez, Fernanda, Jordan, Lathan, Ryan, Jocelyn, Caesar. Let's go. Lene, Alicia, Carson. There we go. Okay. So I'm also seeing people are putting they're answering one side of the question. So they're telling me either what a habitat is or what a niche is. I need to know the difference between the two. Yes, thank you for correcting your answers. All right, so things that I am seeing a habitat is a place where the animals live, and a niche is kind of its spot or what it does in the ecosystem. I like that answer. A niche is how an animal survives in a specific environment. Okay, whereas a habitat is more where it lives. The niche is the job. The habitat is where it lives. I like that one too. So anything that around the that answer to help you remember the two would work. All right, so habitats. This is pretty much the general place where our organisms are going to live. It is definitely determined by the species' tolerance for environmental conditions. So what that means is you cannot have certain animals that live in habitats where they are not where they are not tolerant to live. So we talked about the difference between freshwater and saltwater, and there are specific organisms that live in both of those places. You cannot take a saltwater fish and put it in fresh water. It needs that certain level of salinity to do some of the things that it needs to do. Just like you couldn't put a freshwater fish in the salt water because it can't process all of the salt that is in that area. So they would eventually end up dying if you put them in either one of the habitats where they're not used to being. Same thing if you took a let's see, what's something with short hair? Um, 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 if we took a no, they have thick hair. If we went with, like, say, an Asian tiger, and you put it in an area where Siberian tigers are. Asian tigers, their and blubber mass may not match the same firm blubber mass as a Siberian tiger, who is kind of made to live in colder climates, kind of like a polar bear, versus a animal being in a warmer environment. It may have too much blubber or too much fur and get overheated quickly and not be able to survive well in that area. Food also definitely plays a piece in this, because if there's not enough food to sustain all of the animals, then that could be an issue as well. But a lot of times it is the habitat themselves, the species that live in it are based off of the environmental conditions of that particular habitat. So just a few more differences. A habitat, it's not necessarily species specific, so it can affect multiple species that live in one particular area. It deals with both the biotic and the abiotic factors of a particular area, whereas a niche is the role that the organism plays in that environment. It is very species specific, because different species have different jobs or different roles within that habitat, and it kind of directly relates to how the organism lives or how it survives in that environment. So here's a piece of application. We have our niche of the organism is going to depend on where it lives, but also what it does. We have a picture of a lovely bee that is going on right here. And I want you to tell me, what is the niche and the habitat of that bee? So tell me in our Pear Deck box, what is the habitat and the niche of our bee? Remember, the niche is kind of like the profession or like the job, whereas your habitat is more the address or where it lives. So describe it to me. Oh, I got some good answers. All right, so the answers that I am seeing is the habitat would be the beehive they live in and possibly the gardens nearby. Their niche is to collect the pollen and turn it into honey, because these do look like honeybees. I definitely agree with you. Um, the niche would be to pollinate the plants. The habitat would be the hive and maybe a garden, near a garden. Okay. Mm, the niche should be to pollinate the flowers, make the honey, and take care of the queen. Yes. See, somebody knows a lot about bees. I know that they make delicious honey and they sting. And what I know from watching Bee Movie, which is actually very scientifically accurate to be an animated movie. Alrighty. So now it is your turn to give it a try. So if you look at the pictures that are on your hyperdoc, they deal with either a bear or the fish that is in our picture. If you need to enlarge them, you definitely can, because it is your hyperdoc. But we are going to look at the habitat and the niche for either the bear or the fish. You get to choose which one you want to do. But go ahead and describe the habitat and the niche of our either the bear or the fish. It's up to you which one you want to do. I'm going to set a 4-minute timer so you have time to get your thoughts together and on the paper, and we will move on at the end of our 4 minutes. It's so big. Maybe I'll put it up here. All righty. So somebody go ahead and tell me in our Zoom chat, what is the habitat for either the bear or the fish? Whichever one you decide. Bear or the fish? Which one is it? All right, things I'm seeing. For the bear would be the forest. For the fish would be the river. Okay, I agree with that. because fish are definitely not going to live in the forest. They definitely need water. And the bear can't live in the water either because he can't breathe under there. All right, so the niche. What is the job? This one's a little more difficult. We got to think about it. What is the job of the bear? And the awesome part about typing in your document is you can copy and paste it into the chat. The niche of the bear is to keep populations of fish down. That's a very good observation because without the bears eating the fish, you would have a bunch of fish going around. Good job. All right, what about the fish? What's the niche of the fish? What is the job of the fish? I know we don't know the specific type of fish he's eating, but what is the job of the fish? Depending on what kind of fish it is, if it is a predatory fish, it will eat smaller fish and keep that population down. That is a very good observation. I'm glad y'all know what predatory fish are. Y'all must be fishing like I do. Oh, I forgot to show y'all the picture. My son caught a bass this weekend. I forgot to show y'all that picture. I'll show it to you. I forgot. Somebody remind me at the end of class. I'll pull it up. Okay. What other job could the fish have? It could filter stuff out of the water depending on what kind of fish it is. That's another great observation. Definitely could be. So depending on what kind of fish it is, it could have different jobs. It could be to kind of help with the health of the water, and it could be to keep populations of other animals down. It's a good job. All right, so lastly, we are going to look at how wolves that have been introduced to Yellowstone have changed Yellowstone. We are going to look at these wolves throughout this unit, and we are going to look at them in different lenses depending on what we are talking about for the day. So today we're talking about niches, and just to remind you, niches are the job. What is the job of these wolves in Yellowstone? So as we watch the video today, that is what you are looking for. After you watch the video, you are going to type your answer right here on your document, and we will be done with our notes after this. So we're going to watch it, and once again, you're looking for the job of the wolves in Yellowstone.
One of the most exciting scientific findings of the past half-century has been the discovery of widespread trophic cascades. A trophic cascade is an ecological process which starts at the top of the food chain and tumbles all the way down to the bottom. And the classic example is what happened in the Yellowstone National Park in the United States when wolves were reintroduced in 1995. Now, we all know that wolves kill various species of animals, but perhaps we're slightly less aware that they give life to many others. Before the wolves turned up, they'd been absent for 70 years, that the numbers of deer, because there was nothing to hunt them, had built up and built up in the Yellowstone Park, and despite efforts by humans to control them, they'd managed to reduce much of the vegetation there to almost nothing. They'd just grazed it away. But as soon as the wolves arrived, even though they were few in number, they started to have the most remarkable effects. First, of course, they killed some of the deer, but that wasn't the major thing. Much more significantly, they radically changed the behavior of the deer. The deer started avoiding certain parts of the park, the places where they could be trapped most easily, particularly the valleys and the gorges. And immediately those places started to regenerate. In some areas, the height of the trees quintupled in just 6 years. Bare valley sides quickly became forests of aspen and willow and cottonwood. And as soon as that happened, the birds started moving in. The number of songbirds, of migratory birds, started to increase greatly. The number of beavers started to increase because beavers like to eat the trees. And beavers, like wolves, are ecosystem engineers. They create niches for other species. And the dams they built in the rivers provided habitats for otters and muskrats and ducks and fish and reptiles and amphibians. The wolves killed coyotes, and as a result of that, the number of rabbits and mice began to rise, which meant more hawks, more weasels, more foxes, more badgers. Ravens and bald eagles came down to feed on the carrion that the wolves had left. Bears fed on it too, and their population began to rise as well, partly also because there were more berries growing on the regenerating shrubs. And the bears reinforced the impact of the wolves by killing some of the calves of the deer. But here's where it gets really interesting. The wolves changed the behavior of the rivers. They began to meander less. There was less erosion. The channels narrowed, more pools formed, more riffle sections, all of which were great for wildlife habitats. The rivers changed in response to the wolves. And the reason was that the regenerating forests stabilized the banks so that they collapsed less often, so that the rivers became more fixed in their course. Similarly, by driving the deer out of some places and the vegetation recovering on the valley sides, there was less soil erosion because the vegetation stabilized that as well. So the wolves, small in number, transformed not just the ecosystem of the Yellowstone National Park, this huge area of land, but also its physical geography.
All right. So, what's surprising about the niche of our wolves in Yellowstone? Go ahead and tell me in the chat. You can copy and paste what you typed. But what was surprising about that niche of wolves in Yellowstone? All right, things I'm seeing in the chat. Their niche created other niches for other animals. Yeah, it could have. But what else? Um, by eating that many deer, who would have known it would have completely changed Yellowstone? It's a great observation. Just by introducing one predator, it completely changed the surface. Um, it's surprising that wolves eating other animals could change the way rivers go. Yes, I definitely agree. That definitely caught me off guard when I watched it the first time. Anybody else have anything else you want to share? No? Alrighty. So what we're going to do with the remainder of class, you are going to finish the bottom half of your hyperdoc. Today is submission day, so you will be turning this into Canvas. The second half of what we're doing is we are going to finish our reading on niches and habitats, it explains it and goes a little more in depth with a few things. And then it has some questions in the margin for you to answer. Please remember to highlight your text so that way I can see where you get the source from for your answer. Make sure you highlight it in the correct color, because if you notice, all of the questions are color coded. And then once you are finished, you are going to submit this document to Canvas. Does anybody have questions about what we are doing from the remainder of class? And if you're watching this video and you have questions, please send your questions to my Canvas inbox and I will answer them as soon as I can.